my supposition is that if the Tsarnaev brothers had been living in New York, there never would have been a bombing, because they would have been watched. Someone who had gone to Russia, who had a report from the Russians that he was being radicalized and in fact was a radical, would have had more than an FBI interview or two to satisfy the curiosity of the NYPD. Dealing with something and rounding up other people on cell phone numbers and emails after an event is not good counter-terrorism work.
And Judith mentioned the NYPD. Unfortunately, that is not being done at the national level. Let me give you the case of the Boston Marathon. That bombing should not have occurred. There's no guarantee it should have occurred, but I don't believe it would, as Judith said, would not have occurred here in New York. But the FBI did. They were told by the Russian government that the older brother had been radicalized. Now, there's no reason to believe the Russian government, but it certainly warrants a full investigation. The FBI spoke to the older brother, I think they spoke to his mother, or his father, or his wife, or somebody. They never spoke to anyone in the mosque. Under the Attorney General guidelines, the FBI is not allowed to question anyone in a mosque. Now, how are you going to find out if a person has been radicalized in a mosque unless you go to the mosque? They're not allowed to do that. They also, the FBI never told the Boston Police Department that they had this information on the older brother. And yet the Boston police had 4 detectives with top secret clearance on the JTTF. And they were under the impression they were being told everything. They were never told at all about the older brother. Now, if that had been here in New York, first of all, because of Ray Kelly, the FBI gives the NYPD information whether it wants to or not. He makes sure they get it. They've got these 275 police officers on the JTTF, not 4 like in Boston, 275. Mike Flores in the back, you'd have a better idea. It was way up there in the hundreds. And to make sure we get all the information, the NYPD does have sources. They have sources everywhere. And I think, in fairness to the Boston police, they have a great commissioner, Commissioner Davis. They also would have sources everywhere. If the FBI had gone to them, they would have found this out. For instance, the older brother was thrown out of his mosque in February of last year because he had become so radicalized. And yet, the FBI never found that out. The Boston police didn't know it was significant because they had never been given his name. So that, you have to, yes, you have to have intelligence on the ground, you have to put political correctness aside, you have to realize that Islamic terrorists are going to come from the Islamic community. Same as the Westies came from the Irish community, and we go through the whole list of ethnic groups. We can't be so politically correct as we have to interview the Swedish grandmother before we interview, the Islamic grandson. I mean, the fact is that we have to use common sense. The FBI is not allowed to because of the Attorney General's guidelines. And again, though, I just wish the rest of the country use the NYPD as the model, because there's so much done as far as cooperation between the government and suppliers and distributors and merchants. So if somebody does go to buy a certain type of explosive, if someone does go to buy certain devices, that is told to the NYPD and they can follow up on it. The NYPD program of counterterrorism and intelligence should be a model for the entire country. It's absolutely necessary, it's needed, and if anyone would have told us on September 12, 2001, that the NYPD would have stopped all of these attacks over 12 years, and the results of that would be the next mayor wants to dismantle the program and cut it back. They think we were crazy. Now, this program is essential, it's necessary, and Ray Kelly deserves every possible recognition he can get for what he's done. It's absolutely
Just a brief note on Ray Kelly, and that is, if the mayoral candidates are to be believed, it doesn't seem likely that he will be asked to stay on. I think every one of them ought to be asked specifically whether or not they would keep Ray Kelly on as mayor, well, actually, he should have been mayor, as police commissioner. But beyond that, Kelly was a candidate for several high-level posts in Washington, and apparently it was his stop and frisk activity and the endorsement of that program, and also his Muslim surveillance, a radical Muslim surveillance program in New York, which disqualified him. And I think that says a great deal about the administration's mindset, and it's most unfortunate.